It's that time of week again. Yes, Therapy Thursday, except for we're doing it on a Friday. So we're back with our good friend Austin Ellis. I think this is going to be a great episode today. Amy had someone reach out to her and write her, which I'll let Amy share that, what
Mhm.
that was. But that is prompted this podcast episode because we know a lot of couples out there, including us, have also dealt with this.
We
And
haven't
they're
dealt with this.
well, we're talking about betrayal, right?
Yeah,
So,
there's definitely very different levels, right, Austin?
mhm.
Yeah, yeah, we could talk about the levels for sure.
Yeah, very different levels of betrayal and like breach of trust in marriage. But I did get an email from a person, I don't even want to say husband or wife, but their spouse had an affair, and the struggle that this person is having is that the other spouse does want to make it right and fix this. They're really struggling with what happened, coming back, finding that healing process, that forgiveness, that just like, is it even possible to find passion again, right? With
Right.
something this traumatic. And
Totally.
although we've never been through anything at that level, I can only imagine how hard that is to be that broken in your relationship and even believe or have hope that you can fix that, right? And
Right.
this is why we bring Austin on, is because he has so many amazing stories of people that have been broken, and
No,
his
no.
message of hope and people that he has helped to have an amazing marriage again is just incredible. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
let me probably the place to start with this, like there are different levels of betrayals and there's different areas of betrayal. The hardest for everybody is sexual betrayal. Obviously you can have things like financial betrayal, there's emotional betrayal, there's spiritual betrayal, there's right, it can happen in any area. The reason the sexual betrayal is typically the most challenging, and I've seen some situations where couples there's been an affair, but the actual hardest part of the affair was like falling in love with the affair partner, for example, right? So now that's more than just sexual. That's like we were together and right? And so these depths of how people can get so disconnected from each other, and it's not always like the marriage's fault. It's not always like, well, you're a bad spouse, so I like we use the term partner blame, where we want to avoid that. But one of the things we often want to look at as well is like, how did this come to be, right? So I'll give a little bit of my backstory, or just of maybe my experience with this, because I think it's relevant here. So I went to school, started in 2011, and I went to UNLV, so Las Vegas, and three of my professors were long term that had worked in that realm, like affairs, sexuality, those types of things. And when I went to school, I wanted to go specifically to help couples where there had been sexual betrayal. That was the focus. Part of the motivation for that was my own parents' divorce that affected me as a kid. I had started to struggle with some pornography a little while before I went to school. It wasn't very deep yet. I mean, I'm not minimizing it, but I had started to go down that path. Um, and so that was the motivation. And I remember being in school, one of my professors, he was probably in his 70s, and he kind of asked my motivation, and he talked about his experience, and he said helping couples where there's been betrayal is one of the most challenging types of things people face, and Yeah,
Yeah.
I
I
yeah,
believe
believe
it.
it.
Really.
Is.
Hardest
Hardest
things
things.
for people to heal.
And so that was my whole focus in school, was how do you help rebuild safety? How do you help rebuild trust? Can couples come back to like intimacy that is, hey, we just love each other, not, I need to feel better from my insecurity, or right? Because I've seen this where a spouse will find out, for example, about an affair, and they'll become hypersexual. Now the couple's being sexual a ton, but it's not based in I feel so close to you. It's based in I feel so much panic that if I
Yeah.
can get you close,
Mhm.
or others totally push away, right? And so, truly, uh, from the time I started school until probably 2018, 19, like all I worked with that was it, was couples where there had been sexual betrayal. And in that, there was all often other betrayals on top of that. So, right, sometimes there had been some type of physical abuse. Sometimes there had been big financial betrayals as well, kind of thing. And so this was my, day-to-day clinical practice. I directed two different clinics where we focused on this. And the I would say one of the most important pieces that came out of that, and I still do quite a bit of that work. But the most valuable piece that came out of that is I've literally sat with the process with couples of that healing journey with hundreds of couples specifically in that betrayal realm. One of the clinics I worked out, we coined the term betrayal trauma. Like that, I was
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. And so we were really heavily focused on that. And what I can say is people can heal, like miraculously. Like people can heal, people can forgive. And what's amazing is a lot of times couples can come out of that level of devastation and create a relationship that's better than ever, which seems like what? Like,
It's
Yeah, it
it's
sounds
funny
impossible.
it's
right?
funny to say that because at one of our retreats we had a couple where they had an affair and cheated on each other
Hmm.
and they looked amazingly happy.
It
And
had
and
been a
it
process,
had been a
but
process,
mhm.
but they said we're more in love now than we ever have been. And maybe it was recognizing the mistakes that were made in the past and healing and things like that. But I just wanted to back up what you had just said because we've seen that
Yeah.
firsthand as well.
Yeah, the core component of that, and this is why it's so tricky, is typically, obviously, the one that's feeling betrayed, there's a level of mistrust and trauma, and that affects the nervous system. All the, external perceptions can, activate trauma, but just the mind can just ruminate on
Right.
betrayal. And the nature of all trauma, like, so when I trained as a trauma therapist, the core foundation effect or impact of all trauma typically is some belief, either about self or the type of, trauma that happened. So it can be I can't trust anyone anymore, or I'm not lovable, or right. And this belief now becomes kind of the operating
Hmm.
foundational operating system. And so we have to start to untangle that and say, hey, why did this belief develop? Why, when your spouse stepped out of the boundaries of the marriage, do you interpret it as I wasn't good enough or I wasn't lovable? I'm not safe makes sense, but that's not always true anymore, right? So I'll see a couple that maybe they had an affair, there'd been an affair 10 years ago, and they're mostly great as a couple other than this thing that happened 10 years ago. And the effects of the affair are still present, even though the behavioral stuff, right? And so helping the body come to a place of going, I wasn't safe before, and I didn't know I wasn't safe before until I found out I wasn't safe. Now, how do I trust that I'm actually safe? That's a real challenge for trauma and betrayal specifically. And let me language that like very, very clear. The level of the betrayal for most people, it goes, okay, it makes sense I can't trust you anymore. Like that's pretty easy to see. The
Yeah.
place where most people get stuck is I can't trust me to know when I can trust you.
Mm.
That's another level. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah.
And so if both people want to heal the relationship, you have to take into account what is the effect and the impact. And a spouse saying, it wasn't about this or what, like that, it's kind of irrelevant. What we have to look at is like, now what's the impact and how do you heal the impact and the beliefs and the emotions, telling someone like I was just, you know, disconnected from myself or I got tempted or like that all might be true, but it
Yeah.
doesn't heal
Right.
that, right?
Right.
So this process, and again, it's a process, like you said, Amy. Like it takes time and it takes, effort, and it does take typically some trauma work, but that doesn't necessarily heal a relationship. And so the thing we try to do therapeutically is we have to say, okay, this was the betrayal, whatever, type it was. How did this come to be? And that narrative for, both spouses, they don't start out the same. There has to be a process of understanding of like, here's how this came to be, right or wrong, here's how
Yeah.
it came to be,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so for some couples, it's, my spouse had this crazy, crappy childhood, and I was doing great as a spouse. You're even saying that, but that's something with you. Okay, we have a shared narrative. We see how this came to be, right? Other times it is like you weren't available, and I reached for you for 20 years, and I was pleading for you, and I was begging for you, and someone gave me some attention, or I
Yep.
thought I was making the right decision, or right or wrong, there is a narrative. There is a story from one person that's not matching the others, and you have to come to that shared place, and then you have to say, what's the path that way? And so I often talk about helping them set a new foundation, and that new foundation has to be safety first. Like, I have to demonstrate how I'm not going to betray you again.
Yeah.
And it can't be words. Like, it has to be consistency over time, right? And
Actions.
then, yeah, and then that next piece is the trust component. Well, one, can I trust that I'm safe with you? Two, can I trust why you won't do that again? Three, can I trust that you've made these changes and why and how, right? And so I see a lot of times where one partner will go, get healthy, get better, go to therapy, and they actually are like they've changed. Let's call it repented. They've really done some work to shift that part about them, but it doesn't translate to the relationship. Meaning I made the changes, but my spouse doesn't feel the changes yet. That's where we work to create a new foundation for the couple, safety and trust. And then the idea is you need to build a new relationship, right? Based on these new things. I tell couples all the time, like, I don't think you can heal the old marriage.
Yeah.
This is shattered, depending on the level of betrayal, right? But you can create let's call it higher relationship, one that you both can like build, like we know betrayals won't happen anymore because of what we're building together and working on that, let's call it higher marriage, right? A better foundation type of thing. And when couples do that, and most couples, it takes time before a spouse will do that, meaning I don't want to build a new marriage with you. You're not my safe, you betrayed me, right? And so one spouse, the betraying person has to demonstrate, hey, you're entering into a new relationship with a better version than me. Does that make sense? Any thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
Right. I love what you're saying because no matter how deep of a level this betrayal is, like, I mean, we can talk about all different kinds of betrayal. Like in our marriage, it was financial betrayal, right? And like you said, like we had to be like, okay, we can dwell on this and dwell, and I know this is a totally different situation.
Sure.
In our situation, we can dwell on what happened, we can keep bringing it up, or we can start new today and start building the trust back, gaining the trust back, start the forgiveness process,
Right.
and just create a brand new us, right? And I love that you said that because I know that our situation is different. We've never been through sexual or emotional kind of betrayal. I know that's really deep, and there's a lot more pieces. But at any level, I like what you're saying. Like it's all coming back to finding that narrative, communicating,
Hmm.
without saying that word. It's
Yeah.
all about communicating and trying to be unified. And do we want this relationship? How bad do we want to fight for this, right? And we got to that point with our situation.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I like how you're talking about building a new foundation. And I think a lot of couples out there are thinking, you know, you often see the spouse, one of the spouses, that maybe did the betraying, feel like, okay, you need to forgive me quickly. One of
Sure.
the things for Amy's and my journey is it's taken a lot of time to earn that trust back,
Right.
and that's
Patience.
okay,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
that's okay. But I've been able to do that by again showing that, hey, what happened in the past isn't going to happen in the
Right.
future, and it's different this time, and here's why, and gaining that trust back. And I think no matter what it is, um, yeah, it might take a lot of time, but you can get back there. You can have a better marriage. And I love how you constantly talk about building a new marriage, not trying to build the old one or restore the old one. It's let's start new and build a new marriage. And I almost feel like for a lot of couples, it's like, you started dating before you got married and you kind of had to get to know each other and trust each other and build that relationship back. And it might take that same type of work to build that new relationship, but it can be so
Mhm.
worth it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's, really something that I wish we did, as on a society level for marriage, or, I know some churches or, religious communities or whatever, they'll do kind of this like prepare for marriage type of training. And if couples understood going in, like there's going to be some specific times that are going to be challenging. I think I mentioned this in another episode, like adding a child it's a great thing. It's a significant impact on the relationship that most couples don't know how to adjust to, intentionally. And so when we talk of this idea of like build a new marriage, I often use the analogy of like, hey, you got married and you moved into like, your first apartment together or whatever. And then you grew and you made a little more money and you upgraded, right? A lot of times with couples, I'm like, hey, do you guys want to upgrade? Like, you didn't have the resources to build what's really available to you. Who taught you how to be married? Who gave you the
Yeah,
Yeah.
skills of
Yeah.
marriage, right? I mean, hundreds and hundreds of clients will go, my parents, right?
yeah,
And
exactly.
Which weren't always good things.
Exactly.
it's not bad parents, it's they didn't know how to do it either. And I see situations where kids will say, "Hey, my parents struggled like when I was a kid, but now they're super happy." And it's like, "Okay, cool, they figured it out, but they didn't have it figured out when they were teaching you how to get into a relationship, right?" And so, what I try to help couples with is like there are skill sets of healthy marriage. I think this is a lot what you talk about with the whole ultimate intimacy concept, right? There are skill sets of healing that none of us think we need. Nobody comes
Mhm.
into a marriage and goes, I have the skill sets when I get betrayed by you. Like you don't anticipate that, you don't think that's what will happen. That's why it's a betrayal, right?
Mhm.
And so if we, if couples can get this hope and this belief of, hey, we can come out of this on the other side with more of what we really want. I'm willing to work towards that with you. Are you willing to change, right? And there is a valuable piece that it is difficult. Let me give an example. So let's say the betrayal happens, and the person betrayed has like, this is why you did it. Like I'm creating a meaning, right? And the other person says, no, like this is why I did it. Like this is my factual reasoning for doing this. It doesn't justify it. It's not okay, but like this is the reality. There needs to come a component for the person who's been betrayed where they can accept that reality. They may not love it, they may not agree with it, but like that is the truth from the partner, not the truth from the emotion that they're feeling, if that makes sense,
Makes
Yep,
right?
sense. Yeah.
100%. Yep.
And
Hmm.
so, right, if someone betrays, and I think this is an important part, like you do have to take responsibility. Like I messed up. I hurt you. I betrayed our covenants, our promises, and not justify it. Okay, it's not justifiable, but there are some contributing factors that played into how this came to be. So, for example, one of the really difficult things is right or wrong. If a partner says you were never available and we were never being intimate and I was trying, and like that doesn't justify a betrayal. The betrayal is still a betrayal, but also so is the you were never there thing. Or you could just look at it as the reality. Okay, because the partner in this example wasn't there, it was more difficult for me to not make unilateral decisions with finances. I was angry at you and I right? Like,
Yeah.
but
Right.
let's just
Yeah.
see what the reality is, and then okay, like it doesn't make it okay. It just okay, this is what this is, not what my trauma is going to keep telling me and my insecurities and my hurts. When that acceptance can come into place, that's where couples can start to learn from the hurts and the mistakes and the disconnect It's not a blame thing. It's a let's learn how we got to a place where this isn't working. And I often tell couples, it doesn't help us to spend, 5 years looking into your history.
Mm.
We want to look forward. What do you need to build a healthy relationship? What do you need to feel safety? What do you need to build trust? And then even if we build safety and trust, that doesn't mean you know how to build a new marriage, right? Any thoughts with that?
I think a lot of people have a hard time letting go of betrayal or different things from the past because they tell themselves, if I move on and forgive that, then I'm saying that it wasn't that big of a deal,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I know for me, or just I think we as humans feel that way, and it's so important that we do move on because, like you said, if we keep holding on to the past, we aren't going to allow ourselves to have the future that we want.
Right.
It will never happen.
Yeah.
And
You're thinking, yeah.
I
Sorry. Go ahead.
I
I'll
was
let you
gonna
know.
I was also gonna add in, like, I think like Jesus Christ plays such a big role in this, right? Like we have to he can be such a big help to us and we can turn to him, but like we're commanded to forgive others. And every marriage situation, betrayal situation is going to be different. That doesn't always mean you stay.
Sure.
It doesn't always mean you put up with certain things. It means like you have to deep inside realize that you're going to have to come to a point sometime, and
Right.
everyone's going to look different, that you have to forgive. That
Right.
doesn't always mean stay. It doesn't always mean fix, but it means forgive, right? That's going to look different to
and
everybody.
forgive doesn't always mean forget, right?
Right.
Sometimes we learn lessons and we're like, you know what, I
Mhm.
forgive, but I also recognize that you know, I learned
Mhm.
a lesson from that and I
Right.
can't forget what I learned.
But forgiving means that I'm willing to move forward and like give this marriage another chance. And I've never
Mhm.
been in a betrayal situation that deep. I don't know what that feels like. I
Yeah.
can't even comprehend it. I'm sure that forgiveness aspect is insanely hard to do.
Sure. Yeah.
I can't even
Yeah.
comprehend it. But
Right.
you've given me hope from the experiences of couples that you've helped forgive and heal through this kind of situation, no matter what it is. And I see people come out stronger.
Oh,
So
we do
I
too.
know that Christ heals.
I agree with
We
that. You know,
do.
it's interesting because some people do forgive, maybe let's call it too quickly.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's like, hey, I don't want to deal with the pain. Let's just move forward. I forgive you, kind of thing. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the depth of intimacy can return, right? Especially on an emotional level. I see it all the times where people will re-enter sexually, probably before it's safe, to be honest. Um, so I think the component here is, yes, forgiveness is a part of the process. A lot of times, people that have done betraying will push for forgiveness before healing has happened or before a change has happened.
Yeah.
Right.
And one of the things that happens, we call it spiritual bypassing, where, hey, I stepped out of my values, for example, I hurt you, but we have a shared value of let's forgive each other, right? Well, let's first talk about the shared value of let's not betray each other. Like, let's work on that one. How did that come to be? What changes are you going to make? I'll work on forgiveness, but forgiveness also doesn't unfortunately equal healing, right? And so couples have to come to this place of like, the reality is this is where our relationship is. It's damaged.
Mhm.
Do we want to have a healthy marriage? Maybe healthier than it's ever been. Do we want to do the work for that? So I'll often lay out with couples pretty early. Here's what I foresee this looks like. Just be really honest with yourself. Take a few days, take a week. Am I willing to do the work of change and growth that we have this chance again, right?
Mhm.
And so there is, process, like I would say sequencing, and it's not exact for every couple. But yeah, I think forgiveness of self if you've betrayed, forgiveness of the spouse when you've been betrayed. It's hard because we think that self-protection, whether it's a lack of forgiveness or it's I'm in my trauma, I'm in my fear, we think that is the safety component. Like if I'm in fear and I never trust you, I'm safe. Being in fear and anger or whatever, that doesn't feel safe in the body. That doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And so having that as the protector, it doesn't work. And so a person has to work through that. How do I let go of the anger? It makes sense to be angry. angry in a marriage doesn't equal happy marriage, it equals angry in a marriage. Do you want happy marriage or angry self-protection marriage? Either one's fine. Let's just work on what do you want. And so that idea of like releasing some anger, right? Releasing resentment, fear. There's different processes we do, and ideally, that healing journey isn't just happening one-on-one with a therapist. Like if I come together with a couple where there's been a betrayal, my goal is to help the relationship to get to a place where the person who has done the betraying is now safe enough to be a source of helping the other person heal. That's very vulnerable, right? And that doesn't happen right off the bat. It has to be a process where a spouse says, "Okay, I've seen you make some changes. I'm still very hurt. I'm going to let you start to be a source of helping that heal so we can reconnect versus I'm going to go get that healing so I feel better, but I still don't want to connect with you." Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
And so I think going back to one of the things that is, I mean, the most valuable, I think that you said, Amy, is like Christ can heal marriages. Christ can help heal betrayals. But it's not like a magic wand snap of the fingers. Healing is a process, and it is a, I think of this like analogy of like, cupped hands. And I remember hearing this symbolism of like the cupped hands symbolize two things. It's the beggar, like I need something, and it's the giver, right? And one of the things that's really helpful, when working with couples, especially from a like a spiritual perspective, is okay, what's in your hands? Pain, hurt, mistrust. What do you want? Peace, healing, closeness. We have to empty this out, meaning you have to give that pain to receive the peace. If your hands and heart are filled with the pain, which it makes sense, of course you're hurt. But as long as you hold on to that, you can't receive Christ's healing and you can't receive your partner's love. You can't truly receive their change. Like I see that. This is a common thing. I've seen people like 3 years of hard growth, change work. They've overcome real significant challenges. They are a different person, and the spouse can't see it. They won't receive the change because subconsciously they're believing they're safe by keeping you distant, which ultimately is not what you want. You want a connected relationship. And so obviously we're talking these types of things great need some specialization on a on a helping level. But I think one of the things couples miss the most is the spiritual component. I see couples all the time trying to heal from betrayal with no, it's like psychological and emotional, and that's all insufficient if there's not a spiritual component of healing. And most people they don't know how to do that. And I think the place to start is just pouring out that pain in prayer, even if you don't believe in God, just like pouring it out and letting that, often sometimes it's peace, sometimes it's comfort, sometimes it's just that sense of like I'm not alone, right? But calming that trauma, calming that voice in the head that's like, you're not safe, you're not good enough, you'll never be loved, whatever that is, allowing that to heal through God is important.
Yeah.
Love it.
So where we probably have almost every couple listening to this podcast has maybe felt some sort of betrayal, small, large, whatever, in their marriage. Quickly for the next maybe 2 or 3 minutes before we wrap up, what can a couple simply do together to start the process of healing? What would be like step one, step two? We know that there are things that might take a lot more than this, but at least starting to open the doors versus feeling stuck to where, hey, we had this happen and we both just don't even know what to do or where to start to get over it.
Yeah.
At least some things that couples can start doing to open up that door to healing.
Well, because
Yeah.
you're talking about so many people, because we get so many messages about, the damage from pornography,
Mhm.
the impacts of social media, even just being betrayed, feeling like the spouse is checked out because their phone's more important. Down to financial, down to the deeper, more emotional affairs happening at work, emotional only, very sexual. Like there's just so much stuff. So
Yeah, I guess the bottom line is how do couples start opening the door, or what's the first thing they can do? Probably sit down and talk to each other. And I mean,
Right. Yeah.
simple
Yeah, I
steps
think
to start that process.
yeah, I think one of the most important things that but like both people just have to like look at, and it seems simple, but it's like we just need to look at reality right now. Intentional, unintentional, what is the impact on the marriage, on your spouse? Well, my spouse is in trauma. My spouse doesn't trust me. My spouse is hurting. My spouse blames themselves. My spouse hates my guts. Like, let's get to what is the impact of this behavior and let's get to acceptance, right? Like, okay, this is the reality. I think for the person who's done the betraying, the most valuable step, which honestly is hard for a lot of people, is taking responsibility without any blame or justification. I mean, I'll go into some of my story in different places. I probably have done that in the past, but there were things that I experienced, not with my wife, but in other significant relationships before I got married, where I had done some betraying actions and been betrayed. And it's like you start to justify, well, you hurt me, I hurt you, right? Coming to a place of just this ownership, like I was hurting and I did this, doesn't justify it, right? Doesn't like, but that responsibility of I messed up, I hurt you, and I want to help it get better. I want to make changes. Like that's going to be step one. I don't think couples can progress if they're still debating, is
right.
there actually a
100%.
wound here, right? I think then getting this clarity of what do you want? So if we go back to kind of the marriage analogy, like is our marriage destroyed? Is it like a big windstorm came and like a part of it's been damaged? Like, hey, we can still parent together really well. I can still do date nights with you. I'm okay to like connect emotionally, but like sex is really damaged right now. Like, let's just assess the situation and accept that portion of it and then go, what do we want to do? I would like to, I know I betrayed you. I would really like to create something better and healthier together where, we're making decisions together or we're not so disconnected or we're not vulnerable or whatever, right? Um, now let's call it vision is the step there. Um, Therapeutically and psychologically, looking at what you don't want will never equal what you do want, right? And so a lot of times with couples that come in and they're like, this happened, and they're like, we don't want that anymore. And I spend time with them. Of course you don't want that anymore. You didn't want that before it happened, but
But
it
yeah,
Right.
still happened. So what do you want that you didn't know how to create? We want a marriage where this betrayal type stuff won't happen. Okay, perfect. Let's look at what that really looks like.
Mhm.
What's the level of connectedness? What's the level of safety? Is there some boundaries in the relationship that protect it? Meaning, whatever, a million stories. You don't go on guys' nights anymore to Vegas and drink at 2 a.m. Like, that's just a rule for the marriage
Right.
because it's vulnerable or whatever, right? Like, she doesn't XYZ. What are we going to do to have this new type of relationship that's safe for both of us, where betrayals and hurts aren't going to happen again for either of us. And then you can start to gain tools and skills to create that. Does that make sense?
I love
Yeah.
how you're talking about boundaries because it's amazing how many people don't set boundaries in place, and that's oftentimes where they get into trouble
Right.
with some of these betrayals is because they don't have any boundaries. Oh, I didn't know I was doing anything wrong, right? We've never talked about that or whatever. So, anyways,
It's really important. Yeah,
well,
well, we should do an episode on boundaries. I think this should
Sure.
be kind of a
Yeah.
part two to like
Yeah, let's do it.
maybe you've never had something like this happen. Maybe you are going through the depths of hell in your marriage right now because of lack of boundaries or
yeah,
whatever. I think we need to do part two on how to, create this new marriage, right?
Yeah,
Starting from
yeah, I
scratch
love that.
and how to
And
set it up for that passion and success, right? So,
yeah.
I'll just say
yeah,
this little small piece, maybe a segue to that boundaries episode. One of the really valuable things for a couple to look at is if you look at a boundary, like let's say like a brick wall, okay, like that's where we're not letting certain things into our space
right.
and it protects us, right? And we're also not going outside of that space.
Yep.
Having that kind of around your relationship
Yep.
and then around each individual inside of that. Like, here's how I don't step on your toes within our space, right?
Exactly.
Right. Right.
So we
Oh,
can go into that.
it's
That's, I
so
think, valuable.
important. I think that would be really good.
Yeah, let's dive into that next episode. I think
Yep.
that'll be a great thing to move into. So we hope that this podcast can offer you some insight, some hope, and to know that things can get better. For any of you out there that want to talk with Austin, just email Amy and I at amy@ultimateintimacy.com. We'll put you in touch with Austin. You can work with him. He's amazing.
Mhm.
Like we said, we're planning on doing some pretty big things here that we'll announce pretty soon in the near future. And hope you enjoy these podcasts with us. And so,
Yeah, and give us your questions. If you're going through something, just, email us.
yeah,
Let
love
me
hearing from you.
Talk about it.
let me add one real quick little piece there. For the couple that's, hurting, right? That there has been betrayal, there's a lack of trust and intimacy and safety and all that. One of the biggest challenges is, you have this big hurt pain, and then the approach is let's spend 50 minutes a week on it, and then we have all this other time that there's nothing happening. And so um, there's different ways to do this. Reach out and I can suggest some things. But years and years ago, we started doing like these intensive with couples with these situations, and it was like we'd spend 3 days. Like, let's set a new foundation over these 3 days. Like, let's get the healing process going. A lot of times, a ton of healing can come in that time when couples are guided to the right things, and then they can start this like what's the path to build this new thing that does have safety, does have trust, and trust is it's like a drop at a time. That
Hmm.
drop can happen, once every 2 weeks, or that drop can happen multiple times a day,
Mhm.
but you don't trust until that bucket is kind of
Exactly.
full
Love
and you
that.
have trust now. And so what we try to help couples with is like, let's pour back into this so trust is tangible again. It's felt. It's not just, hey, it's been 3 years. You should trust me again. That's
Right.
Yeah, it's not
It's not about
exactly. It's not a
that.
time
Right.
period. It's about filling that bucket, like you said.
right.
Ooh, I love that.
I love that analogy. What a great thing to end on.
Yeah.
Well, as always, we appreciate you coming on the podcast. And to all of you out there, we hope all of you can find ultimate intimacy in your relationship. Look forward to talking to you next time.